This is Twit.
Now, before we went on air, I made a promise to say, hey, I'm not going to talk about cameras or photography this week on Tech News Weekly. I tried my best not to make that happen.
You can talk about it if you want to. That's the beauty of the show. You book what you want.
So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk about photography. I'm going to have our guest talk about photography. Mr. Bryan Minear, professional photographer, graphic artist, also a Fujifilm ambassador, is joining us this week to talk about the latest camera that was just dropped on us from the folks at Fujifilm. It's the X100V. Beautiful compact system camera. Mr. Minear, how you doing, my man?
I'm great, Ant. How are you today?
Unbelievable as always. It's really good to see you, and I appreciate you hopping in and joining us this week on the show.
Nice to meet you, Bryan.
And
yeah, you too, man. Honored to be here.
Perfect. So I know that you are a Fujifilm ambassador, so that means you got your hands on some goodies way before everybody else did, and you had to keep it a secret.
I wouldn't say way.
So you had to keep it a little bit of a secret.
Sometimes it's sooner than others.
And spend a little bit of time with it. And I saw that you put up some beautiful images and wrote a little bit of a blog about what's been going on with this new device. Tell us a little bit about the X100V.
Yeah, so I got it about 2 weeks ago, actually, a little over 2 weeks ago now. But with the, future knowing that it's going to be released like 2 weeks. So it's like content. What do I just want to get my hands on this camera. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not a sales guy. I know there's a lot of kind of stigma to being an ambassador where it's like, well, you're just shoving products down my throat. But I always try to take the approach of, look, there's so many people that want to get their hands on these cameras, like maybe somebody that's looking about their first purchase or upgrading. I want to take it out, use it, get to know the features. That way I can be kind of like a conduit for them to see what the camera can do and what it's capable of. So that's kind of my approach to it. I'm not pushing this on anybody. I just want to, take this little awesome camera, 5 generations ago, the camera that got me into the system to begin with, and, put it to work and see what it can do.
That's a beautiful shot that's up on the screen right now.
And that's something that I've always enjoyed about you is I've been following you for a while here on Twitter and on Instagram, and you don't pull any punches. If you like something about it, you will mention it, and if you don't, you will mention that as well. So you've been pretty straightforward and fair on both fronts for that. Yeah,
for sure. And I think, and here's something that's interesting, like, as ambassadors, a lot of times we'll get these cameras and we don't even get communicated the full information about feature set. Right. We just have to dive in and figure it out for ourselves. So even, I sat down and wrote my that blog post that you just shared. I wrote that on Monday. The announcement was Tuesday. Mm-hmm. So I didn't even know Monday if the camera was weather sealed or not. You know what I mean? Like leading into it, I had no idea. And then I watched the live preview that Fujifilm did, the Fujifilm Summit from London, where they talked about adding the addition, because of the moving element in the lens, adding a filter on the end actually does weather seal the camera, which was a huge, big ask from photographers. That's what they wanted in this system. So it was really awesome, but I had to go back into my blog and then, add this little tidbit about it. Yeah.
Now with this camera, let's look at it from someone that's just going to a merchant to buy their first camera, if you will. What's going to separate the X100V versus going out to buy, say, a Canon point and shoot? Is it the same type of body? Is it the same specs that we're going to look at, different sensors? Are we going to have lens attachments or anything like that? Yep.
So I think the biggest separating point between this and a lot of the other cameras in this form factor is the sensor size. So if you look at, I'm blanking on names right now. There's a Panasonic that's branded Leica, and I forget the model of the camera, but it's got like a 1-inch sensor, a much smaller sensor. So while they're comparable in feature sets and maybe around price point, they're really not comparable when you take the sensor size into account. Now, your average everyday consumer isn't really going to think about those things. They're going to be looking at price, megapixels, but the beauty of this little thing is it's a pocketable little camera that has fully manual controls. You can shoot in RAW. It's got all of the amazing film simulation modes that Fujifilm's known for. So it's got everything that a pro like me loves in a camera system that I can use, out in the field. But it's also just easy, and it's small. You can get attachments for the lenses to make. There's a wide adapter that makes it a 28 millimeter equivalent, and then there's a telephoto adapter that makes it a 50 millimeter equivalent. So there are some different adapters that you can get into, but I think the real beauty with this camera is just, it is what it is. You know, you get one focal length, and that's what you got.
All right, so that's the difference. This is a single lens. This is only attached to the body. It's nothing that you can remove. This is not a DSLR or anything like that.
Nothing that you can attach on top of the lens as well.
Just the attachment, like he was mentioning, as far as having something to give you a little extra length with your focal length.
If you want to, but it's not. Yeah, I've used them, but I've never needed them for myself. I like the simplicity. Sometimes it's nice to just go out and not have, like, you know, do I change lenses here? Do I put what do I use? It's just a lot easier when you're stuck, and it kind of forces you to think a little more creatively, I think.
Yeah, right. I could absolutely see that. I years ago bought my wife a mirrored SLR camera, a DSLR camera. You can tell that I'm not like as fluent in the camera speak as you both are. But I did that because she really wanted to take some really great pictures. She's like, I really wanted to, we had just had our daughter, and she really wanted to take some nice artistic shots that were better than what she could get on her phone. And I mean, that thing's been used a handful of times because it's so big and beastly, and all of the kind of the different attachments that you can use on it if you know exactly what you're doing.
Right.
This is more my speed because it kind of locks you in. You know what you get out of it. It's pocketable enough. It looks, relatively compact.
Everything I've seen about it looks like it would fit in the jeans pocket and be perfect for something like street photography. Just in the little knobs on it, it has this sort of novelty feel to it.
It totally does. Yeah, a little bit of a retro quality.
It's totally cool to see it,
Yeah.
One of the things that I love, and this camera, but all of the Fujifilm cameras really are the dials. Like you can see in that photo you're showing right now, there's an aperture ring on the lens. You have a shutter speed dial. You have an ISO dial right underneath the shutter speed dial. You pull up actually on the shutter speed dial, it locks in place, and then you can twist around and change your ISO. So like, if you're a photographer that has an understanding of the exposure triangle, you don't even have to dig in a menu to change anything. It's all right there in front of you. When I first started on Instagram, just little tidbit, I was using my phone maybe 50% of the time for the stuff that I was sharing. And as I kind of gradually got more accustomed to my editing style and kind of grew that, like my artistic vision, I kind of outgrew the phone and outgrew it from a quality standpoint. And the X100, at the time it was the X100T, kind of took place of my phone because they're roughly the same size. Like I had a 7 Plus maybe or something like that. So outline wise, it's the same kind of footprint. Obviously the camera's thicker,
right?
But that kind of replaced that phone single lens thing for me. But with the quality, obviously, you get much better quality.
And that body it seems to be the gateway drug, if you will, for the Fujifilm product line. I've always heard the X100T is what people got started on and is what hooked them to where they wanted to keep staying in and buying into whatever else Fujifilm had out there.
There's a Fujifilm manager, and his name escapes me right now. Obviously, he's Japanese, but he always says that he deals. It's like, when he's selling cameras, he feels like he's dealing crack because he just gets people hooked on into this system, and then you can't help but just be addicted to it.
Right, right. Now, one more question, actually two more questions. Price point with this particular body and its availability, and who exactly is this camera marketed towards?
Sure. So price point, it's $13.99. Availability, I think the silver will be available end of February, and I believe the black will be available into March. I believe by end of March. I think that's it. Like I said, I'm not a sales guy, but that sounds right. So, I think honestly, this camera is marketed toward somebody who may be looking to switch systems. Maybe they've been interested in like something about the Fujifilm system, but not sure where to start. I think the beauty of this camera is you don't have to, get a body and then have to decide what lenses you want and kind of a path forward. And what I always tell people when switching systems, like, don't do it unless you have a real reason to. But if you are switching, it's much better if you do it slowly and gradually. Obviously, it's not always like an affordable option to like pick up a camera and see where it fits in your workflow and then build from there. But that's how I did it. You know, I shot Canon for a long time, got the original X100 body and then the X Pro one, and kind of went from there and realized that these cameras could take place of my Canon cameras. And so it happened over the course of like a few years, you know, me transitioning.
Right.
But then also, I think this camera is also for someone who may be in like a DSLR body and hates carrying around a ton of gear, and they just want something really small, simple, capable that kind of gets them back to the passion of photography. Because that's the whole point. That was my whole point in getting into the Fuji system, was getting a camera that was going to get me away from these like work cameras that I could then just kind of like do personal work and have fun with. And so the Fuji system became fun to me, and then that kind of progressed, and you know, I've been with it ever since.
I feel like as you were talking, I was like, yeah, that sounds like me.
His hands
like
went
when
up.
I think about photography and stuff like that, because that's what really kind of drew me away from the DSLR that we do have is just the bulk of it. I'm so used to always having a camera in my pocket, which means like now I want a pocketable camera,
right?
But I would love to make a step up from my Pixel, which I do feel takes pretty great pictures in and of itself, but it's nothing to the tune of what I'm seeing in these pictures. There's just so much more flexibility and dynamic to the images.
The Pixel is a phone and a camera, but that camera is a camera, period. You know, so you're going to get a whole lot of different performance levels there.
For sure. Now the price on this, it looks like around $1,400. So and that's I wouldn't say that that's really outside of the ballpark of someone who wants to take the step up from a casual camera experience into something that has a lot of power.
And it's going to last for a long time. Yeah. You won't need to upgrade that for quite a while, because it's at 26 megapixels as well, right?
Yep, 26.1 megapixels. The sensor's backside illuminated, so it is the same sensor that is in the flagship X-T3 and the X Pro 3. It's definitely around for a while. It's weather sealed, and I was having a conversation on Twitter with somebody last night that was asking, like, just what does weather sealed mean? And I have shot with these cameras in downpours and snow, ice, sand, in the desert, and I have not had an issue with weather sealing. Wow. So they're definitely in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of your Instagram stories out in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing but there's tons and tons of white stuff all over the ground. I think y'all call it snow where you're from.
We live in California.
We got a dusting last night.
A dusting, and it's probably 2 feet.
4 inches.